Hello, good evening and welcome back. COVID and suicide. Japan's rise a warning to the world. Yes, but not quite as you think. So, of course, with coronavirus restrictions enforced by governments, we've seen an increase in suicide rates. And of course, Japan made news at the end of last year because their suicides for November exceeded their official deaths recorded from coronavirus. And of course, when you've got an entire national lockdown based on something that is less deadly than people taking their own lives, you really need to reconsider and take stock of what exactly it is that you're doing. Not when it's just at the start of a surge, if you will, but when you're several months in, then you really need to reconsider what it is that you're doing. Seeing as it's not as if the restrictions have since been lifted, so it's not as if it was the end of it either, it was just in the midst of it. So that is obviously a reason why suicide rates have been going up around the world. But, of course, suicide rates only make news when women are worst affected. That does not mean more women are killing themselves than men, because although that does happen in a select minority of countries, it is almost always men outperforming in that regard. Normally about 4 times as likely to commit suicide as women. However, women are about 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than men, for what it's worth, if you wish to try and balance it out. So why are female suicide rates going up? Because, as they say, in 2020, for the first time in 11 years, suicide rates in Japan went up. Most surprising, while male suicides fell slightly, rates among women surged nearly 15%. In 1 month in October, the female suicide rate in Japan went up by more than 70% compared with the same month in the previous year. So, why is it? And why is it that the COVID pandemic appears to be hitting women so much worse than men? Oh, and trigger warning, of course. It's a bit late for that, sorry. The reason that they touch upon, as it happens, is something that they brought upon by themselves. So there you can see the number of suicides in Japan, and thankfully it is overall a downward trend. Fantastic. You can see the male-female distinction there as well. Of course, it's exactly the kind of thing that you would expect. But they go on to say, Japan has seen a large rise in single women living alone, many of them choosing that over marriage, which entails quite traditional gender roles still. Professor Ueda says young women are also far more likely to be in so-called precarious employment. So what does this mean? Well, it means that women, the world over, are of course being told not to settle down. In fact, it is of course to get as much education as possible, be in school as long as possible, which is why now there are more female students than male students, in the UK at least. Not in anything important, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is just the numbers on the page. Until then it does matter because they go into STEM. Of course, if you put in an A for arts, add another M for medicine, you start to level the playing field. But regardless, we can't have that because then it might be seen as fair. But that's what happens. So they go for more so-called education, which is by and large indoctrination, which then means, of course, they're extending their childhood at the cost of their adulthood, which then means when they do leave, they're going to think that they're more educated than they are, and due to the biological nature of hypergamy, they want a man that's more successful than them, and using educational criteria is a very straightforward standpoint in order to find somebody who's more successful for you, especially if it is too soon to see how well they're doing from an employment or financial earnings standpoint. So that's pretty straightforward. Understandable. Because, of course, men are more risk-taking than women, and therefore the woman wants to be taken care of, and the man generally wants to take care of their partner instead. It's just how things have worked. However, now it is more difficult to do that. And what do these education qualifications actually get you? Well, it gets you so-called precarious employment. And of course you've got several Starbucks jokes like that, or McDonald's jokes. You know, it's like you don't really need to spend 3 years for this liberal arts degree. You just need to know, do you want fries with that? But it's a fair point, of course, and so much so that it's gotten to the point where degrees, especially particular degrees as the aforementioned ones, are going to be a detriment if you're trying to get a job instead of actually work as a benefit. Okay, with this in mind, that means women are told to prioritize career over family, prioritize materialism over spiritualism, and that never leads to a happy outcome. The vast majority of people would find more joy in family. Of course, men wish to take care of them financially and physically speaking, but the women are there for the nurturing side. The vast majority of women would be happier with a family than a career. But of course, this isn't what is being told. What does that mean? Well, it means trying to make women into men. It means trying to get women career-driven, being single, being alone, isolated, and having to focus on things, and stressing out about things, and having to take these risks, instead of being taken care of. But of course, women are less likely to take risks. What does that mean? They're less likely to have massive success in this regard. Also less likely to face massive failure. But it means that overall, they're not going to be performing quite as well as the men that they are trying to imitate, whether they are aware of it or not. So, in the end, seeing as they don't have as such high risk tolerance, this is where they end up. And if you're trying to get women to copy males' outcomes, that is also going to include suicide, which comes out of a lot of stress and a lack of meaning and a loss of hope. So, do not be surprised if when you try to get women to copy men and copy their outcomes, you end up with an outcome of the same suicide rates. And I'm pretty much going to leave it there. To wrap up, I will of course mention how this article all focuses on the women and then the female-only institute in order to help the women from killing themselves, and particular examples for anecdotes to appeal to pathos, just to make it more emotionally interesting for you. And I do not say that to take away from the tragedy of any of these females' deaths. Not at all. Of course, all are a tragedy, even if they are also a statistic. But if your point is women most affected, and also effective, I'm sure, then simply take another look at the graph and you tell me what the facts lay out before you. If you wish to keep viewing men as expendable and women as to be on a pedestal, stop trying to get women to be men, because you can see from graphs like this where that ends up. But hey, let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think that maybe the push for equality has gone a little bit too far, and they're starting to have regrets by realizing that with great freedom comes great responsibility? Not just power, but no, with freedom actually comes responsibility as well. And that's not going down so well. And maybe, just maybe, these traditional gender roles, and just tradition in general, does actually have the answers to questions that were forgotten, to problems that were forgotten, but are slowly being realized again. And so it seems we've got to go down to first principles and reason it out again, only for it to be forgotten in a few centuries again, and have to go through this cycle all over again. But maybe we can expedite the process this time and help out those coming after us. But as always, until next time, have a good one.